But what is that relationship with being an atheist and grieving?
Yeah, so that's a great question, a great observation. One, it creates a greater sense of, this is shitty, but it creates I don't mean to say it like this, but a greater sense of personal responsibility for me to be the arbiter of the stories, right? As I mentioned to you before, my mom died shortly after, my grandfather died shortly after, my grandmother died. A whole side of my family just disappeared. And the only person that knew anything about that world was me. And so with being an atheist, I feel responsible for carrying whatever that world was that we made, right? With all those memories, all of those little things, like the job of carrying that on is now mine. And so for me, that actually, I think, to your guest's point, it actually does make me feel in some ways closer to them, right? It does make me feel in some ways like I think about them more frequently because I don't have the faith that their spirit, their essence, or whatever it is still somehow around contributing, that I am the one responsible for it. And I think about it a lot. I wouldn't say I think about it more or less than another person, but I'd say I still think about it quite a bit because I feel like that's the only way I'm going to experience it again is by my own memory and retelling of it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. Actually, I never even thought about it that way, that, people lean on the fact that I might see someone again, or some people, and the fact that you don't believe that, it forces you to kind of think about them more because that's the only possible experience that you'll have with them again. Is that right?
More or less, yeah.
God, that's intense. Oh, that's the wrong person to say it this time, I guess. But that's a really interesting. That's a really interesting point to think about that. Where are you today with not having your mom, and remind me how long it's been since she passed?
Yeah, so just about 5 years. So we talked about that first year after they're gone. And it being really intense because you're having all of these firsts, but you have that community around you. I now have 2 kids. You can probably hear them in the background. My apologies to the listeners. They're adorable. Just imagine the cutest little fucking kids you've ever seen, like when you listen to the annoying sound in the background. And it is so intense. So my mom had me when she was 23. So she was a young mom, and the majority of her life, she passed away at 57. She was a mother. Being a mother was a huge part of who she was and how she contributed to the world, and obviously how I related to her. Being a dad is, and I just turned 40, and I've got these young kids, and I keep having these moments where I'm like, holy shit, my mom did this when she was 26. Like, I have a 3-year-old. He's doing this crazy stuff. She handled this as a 26-year-old. As a 26-year-old, I was getting my car impounded for not paying parking tickets. What? You know what I mean? Like things like that, where you have this massive respect for a person and you want to be able to call them and say, you killed it. Like, you nailed it. I was a shit as a teenager. I am so sorry. And you don't have that ability. And so in some sense, the grieving is really intense lately, because I am experiencing a very intimate part of her life for the first time, even though I had known her for so long. And because of that, again, to that, your other guest's point, I do feel closer to her these days.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Again, I honestly would have never, me personally, I would have never thought that, being an atheist would actually have those thoughts of bringing someone closer. So I'm actually happy you mentioned that. It's why I love these conversations, and exploring these conversations, because, when religion starts coming up and beliefs, my community is tremendously respectful for the most part, but, it's hit or miss as the following grows and whatnot. You're going to get the negativity. So again, I implore people, in my opinion, to have these conversations, to explore different perspectives and listen to the other person, because you do it in such a respectful way. You're not diminishing other people's beliefs. That we all have our beliefs. And I've always said, it's either everyone's going to be right, because maybe what we believe is what happens, or most people are going to be wrong and one group is going to be right. I don't know what's going to happen. So it's interesting to me. And I know this is maybe a summarized question, but what is your relationship to death in regards to, with your experiences? How does that shape the way you live your life?
I wish it did more, honestly. I would love to tell you that, I'm a full send like YOLO guy now, and like I see things and I'm just like, oh man, like this is it. This is our chance. This is our opportunity. Life is short. Life is fragile. You've got to go do it. You've got to chase the dream. And I wish I was a little bit more like that. If anything, I'm a bit more cautious, which is a very practical response. And in other ways, I'm a bit more, I have an urgency to tell stories in a way that I didn't before, because the reality is you only really die the last time someone says your name. And I have seen that more. I didn't come up with that. Somebody else did. But the reality of that really hits when you're in the hospital with that person who's passing away. And man, when my mom died, it was so intense because her decline was so rapid. She had stage 4 cancer. She had been kind of having a cough. She'd been sick for 6 months, but it was this cough, and she kept going to the doctor, and the doctor's like, maybe it's pneumonia, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And then it was this really, anybody who's ever lost somebody to cancer can probably relate, particularly over the holiday. So during December, everything is kind of fucked in hospitals, like more fucked than normal. And no offense to healthcare workers out there, but because of the holiday, lab results take longer, biopsy results take longer, all of these little things, right? Even to get into your biopsy, even to get your PET scan or your CAT scan, all that shit. It's just like, it's so backed up because people are trying to take time off, understandably. Humans are humans. And my mom went in for a biopsy. She went under general anesthesia, and she was not, we were hanging out with her. This was right around Christmas, and she was not coming out of her general anesthesia very well. She was having a really hard time, really sick to her stomach. Her health was like kind of declining after this. And it's like, oh, Mom, this is like a pretty mild procedure. Like, but I had a hard time when I went into general anesthesia for surgeries. I'm like, maybe it's just something about our DNA. And between her getting that biopsy, her getting a diagnosis, which was stage 4 cancer, and her ultimately passing away, it was like 3 weeks. And so it was like, you're a normal ass person eating hamburgers on the couch with your son. You're terminally ill and you're dying. That said, my mom's I'm obviously biased, but objectively, like the people in the hospital liked her so much. And her decline was shocking to them because she came in as a super healthy person. And it was so shocking to them that these are people who see, and my mom was relatively young. They see people die. I mean, we're in the ICU, right? They see people die literally every day. I could tell through them that it was uncomfortable for them to watch. And to the point where as she was being removed from life support, her nurses were in tears. And her doctor, when he had to tell me that it was terminal, he was so apologetic because he felt like this is a person who shouldn't have this happen and this is just out of his control, right? It had such a profound impact on them. But I know that they probably don't remember her right now. Like, I know that maybe in that moment she was the most important person to them, right? But I know that, like, they probably see one of those every couple of months. And I really respect that they were that emotionally available and that emotionally vulnerable. But having that experience of like, shit, okay, this is the biggest thing in the world to me. Anyways, I know it's not the biggest thing in the world to them. And so it's my responsibility as the person who survived to make sure people remember who the fuck she was. It's my responsibility as the person who survived to tell people, hey, to tell that story that I just told you, that she had such an impact on the people in the ICU that they were actually in tears because they couldn't save her, right? Which is, hopefully the response you would want from any medical professional, but like you understand that they are exposed to this shit so frequently. So anyways, that is really what I got out of it, was this just sense of urgency about like, fuck, I have to tell stories, man. I have to tell people about this stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to die, as I just saw, at any time. And these stories are going to die with me.